Hey guys and girls, it's Blackjack with 396 Guitars. We have a PRS SE on the bench, entry-level guitar. But I had some comments recently, or requests actually, about pay attention to basic tools. I've done these videos before about basic tools needed to do a setup, and I'm going to try to really explain each step, even though many of you have seen it and many of you know it. Some of you are new viewers, and I'm going to try to be more specific, specifically going out to DH Goody. I got your back, bud. So let's get to work. We have a PRS here. Nothing fancy, but a really, really nice little guitar. We're putting elixirs on it. It's a Restring and Setup. So feeler gauge, 12 thousandths of an inch. We will get into that. String gauge, string height gauge. That is for measuring action. Pickup height. I use these. It is 1/8 and 3/32 for bass and treble respectively. And you need a capo. Right? Capo, which is where we always start. Capo, the first fret, and we're going to use the 12 thousandths feeler gauge. Now, why do we do this? Yeah, we have to know what our neck relief is. So, capo at the first fret, hold at the 17th fret with your other finger, okay? Or the body joint, whichever is closest. And at the 7th fret, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you feel with the feeler gauge. And if the feeler gauge gets stuck in there like that, it's an indication it's too tight. What you want is it to just barely kiss the fret and the string. And use a feeler gauge. This nonsense, and I've seen this, where they hold here and then tap with their thumb. Oh yeah, you got good string action. Or your string action's too high, or it's too low. There's no way you can tell by doing that. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. You measure with the right tools. You follow? So we know that we're going to do, and I'm doing this before. I always check this, and sometimes I will actually make the adjustments before we restring and what have you. I do that for a couple of reasons, because I want to make sure that, first of all, that the truss rod is working. The adjustment here is the first one that we need to make, because all other adjustments follow. All right, if that makes any sense. So we know that we have to give it more relief. In other words, right now this neck is too straight, more, worst case scenario in a back bow. And if you sight down the neck, and I just measured it and it was too tight, this neck is flat, flat, flat. And every neck needs a little bit of relief in it so that the string can do its thing. In other words, when you pluck your string, it actually goes around in a perfect concentric circle, right? And if it doesn't have enough room to do that, it will buzz. Yeah, got the wrong tool right off the bat. I believe that's a 7mm. So facing the truss rod adjustment right here. If you want to loosen, you must turn to the left. Left is to loosen, right is to tighten. So I want to put at least a good half a turn on this, because I know it's really straight. And then tune to pitch. So each time you make that adjustment, you're changing the tension on the neck, and therefore changing the tension on the strings, or changing the tension that the strings are putting on the neck. So tune it back up to pitch. This way you know, and you don't have to tune it perfectly. You just have to get it close so you know you have the right string tension. Don't worry about the trem. All we're adjusting right now and paying attention to is neck relief. And usually, once we get this set, it will follow through and hold all the way through the setup. But we always recheck it. Needs more. My guess is this guitar probably has a two-way truss rod in it. And we're going to need it because it really needs to be forced into a forward bow. In other words, we're forcing it into a forward bow to give it some relief. I can actually physically see the relief in it now. Tune back to pitch and check again. I hope this is helpful. And there we go. Now we're not tight. We're just allowing the feeler gauge to slip between the 7th fret and the bottom of the string and the top of the fret. You want it to go in there without moving or pushing the string. It needs one last little turn. It was actually quite a ways out. Yeah, we're close enough. Yeah, I had that gentleman asked in a comment, he was requesting that there we go. That's perfect. It's just kissing both the top of the fret and the bottom of the string. That's how you set your neck relief. Now, of course, we're going to recheck that once we get done stringing it and doing other things to it, but that's where we start. That's always the starting point, right? Now remember, we haven't even taken the strings off this guitar yet. We still have to do the job. But I want to know where we're starting. Because once we get done putting the new strings on, yeah, see, we're way high. Okay, explain. That's your string gauge. I call it a string gauge. I use the Stumac one. It's the most accurate. I prefer to use 64ths of an inch. There's a lot of different measurements on this. So what I'm looking for is 5/64ths, right? So it's high because when you put relief in the neck, you're effectively dropping the surface of the board lower than the strings. And to adjust that is right here on the saddle. So I'm going to quickly adjust this because final adjustment will happen after we restring it. That is a 1.5 on this particular saddle, and we're going to lower it down a whole turn on each side of the saddle. Critical, and you guys can argue this, your saddles should be level to the deck of the guitar. You don't want them following the radius. The string will follow the radius by measurement, but the saddle, you want it level. And you can just eyeball that. There's really no way to measure that. You just look down there, sight it, and make sure that one side of the saddle isn't higher or lower than the other side. And once you do that, make sure you're up to pitch before you check your measurement. Right? And we're aiming for 5/64ths. And that is perfect. It is just showing the line of 5/64ths. I recommend everyone get one of those. Yep. Some of this, they've got the best stuff. Some of it is a little pricey. I'm not going to get into that debate, but that in a nutshell just explained two parts of doing a setup on the guitar. The first thing you do is the neck relief, and that's critical. You have to start there before you move on to anything else. So effectively, without doing the other strings, because I'm going to do a whole setup on this, and we're going to set it as a floater, which makes a difference in string height. We measure capo at the first fret, hold at the 17th fret or the body joint, whichever is closer, and you use a 12 thousandths feeler gauge on the 7th fret. And you adjust as necessary in small increments until you get to where it's just kissing at the 7th fret. I hope that's helpful. I'm going to pause here while I de-string, okay, because I want to get the trem bar out. I want to de-string it. I'm going to clean up the frets and oil the board off camera. This whole exercise for this video is about making the adjustments and the tools necessary to do that, okay? So stand by. Okay, so it's been a hot minute. Cleaned the frets, oiled the board, polished the frets, got the neck relief set. We're going to double check that momentarily. We restrung the instrument. I have off camera been adjusting a little bit the trim in the back. I took a spring out because the customer requested a little less tension on the trim. There were 4 springs in there. I took one out and kind of set it up as a traditional Strat style floating bridge. When I got it, it was hammered all the way down to the body. Yeah, to float it on a PRS, it needs to be level. It's pretty close to level right now. Let's just tune it up and try our trem and see if it's becoming stable. It should bounce back into tune, into pitch. Yup. Yup. Now it's okay if it comes back each time a little bit flat, and when I say a little bit, like 1 cent, because the strings are still stretching. And the instrument is actually still trying to find equilibrium. But at this juncture, it's getting to the point where it's stable enough that we can go through and check the rest of our measurements. Now, just like when we started, the first thing I want to check in my setup, recheck, is my neck relief. Different strings, they're new strings. They were a little bit different kind of gauge, and we want to make sure we don't have anything that went out of adjustment with the neck relief. I'm going to live with that. It feels good, and it looks good. It's got just enough. It's just perceptible by eye. You can see it and you can measure it. And we're coming right back into pitch. Now, that's a really good sign. So the next thing we want to address is, since we've got our trim set where it's level and it's coming back into pitch, our strings and our springs underneath are starting to find equilibrium, we can go ahead and start adjusting string height action. That's pretty important. So, string gauge. This looks like a Stratocaster. I'm going to set it up like a Stratocaster, which is 5/64 all the way across the radius of the board. I don't know where it is. I can live with that. That one's a little high. Now, the the more drastic the change and adjustment in string height can affect the tremolo and the spring tension in the back. So we have to be mindful of that and keep checking it. A little bit more. Make sure that your saddles are staying level. And after you make your adjustments, you're going to go back and tune to pitch and double check. That one's a little too low. That's our D string. I like that. I like that. That one's a little too high. That's our B string. I know my fat head is probably in the way. This is a 1.5 we're using. The Allen wrench. Small adjustments. Measure. Get where you want to be. The high E is too high. Too tall. This is fine tuning. Still a little too tall. Still a little too tall. Why are you not cooperating? Gutsy. All right, now you have to go through that whole exercise one more time because you have to tune it back to pitch and then make sure that that adjustment stays where it is. And depending on whether you went up or down will depend on whether it goes sharp or flat. Now, if you adjusted these all down and they went flat and you had to tune them back up, it could affect how we're looking down here with our bridge. You want your bridge on a PRS to be level with the body. It can float up or down, but you want it level with the body as much as possible. It's looking pretty good. It could come up slightly, which means I probably have just a little bit too much spring tension. But until this instrument settles overnight after all these final adjustments, I'm not going to do that. All right, we got tuned back up to pitch. It should come back very close. No, just double check your string action, your saddle adjustments. They should be really, really, really close to where you were. Nothing went too far out of whack. Yeah, I can live with that. Now, we got all that done. We get to move on to intonation. Pitch, 12th fret. Getting some buzzing. Wonder what's causing that. I'm pretty sure we're going to have some high frets down here. It is flat, which means we need to shorten shorten our distance. That's odd. That is odd. Usually they're sharp. It's so rare that you find that your intonation is flat. There we go. Okay. And then, of course, you have to go through every one. Good. Again, a little flat. That's our D string. So if you're sharp, the distance is too short. If you're flat, the distance is too long. Perfect. Yep. That one's sharp. That means the distance from your saddle to your nut slot is too short. You need to lengthen it. That means you have to bring your saddle back. And this can take a while. It's closer. I usually don't show this entire process because it is literally chasing your tail for, well, a good long while until you get it perfect, or as perfect as the instrument will bear. Still wants to come back. By the client's own admission, this guitar, to the best of his knowledge, has never been set up, and I can tell because just about every adjustment on it was out of whack. There we go. B, sharp. Not surprising to me because I can tell these saddles are all the way forward. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, let's double check. Dead on. Perfect. Yeah, I can live with that. Yup. See how tedious this can get? I'm going to pause here because this is going to have to settle for a little while. I love it. Okay, so the intonation is set. We had to do quite a bit of adjustment, and yeah, they're all over the place, and that's normal. We'll make sure that after you get your final setting for your string height, that your saddles are level, that they're level to the deck of the guitar. That's kind of important. Yep. Yep. Okay. Well, I think we can actually play it. I want to do one last thing. So the bass side, this little tool, it's just a feeler gauge. On the bass side, you hold the very last fret, it's 1/8 of an inch. And you want that to be able to slide under the pickup. If it's too tight, you got to lower the pickup. If it's too loose, you got to pull the pickup up. The reason why is because, well, pickups are magnetic. They operate in a magnetic field. If you're too far away, it will lose power. If you're too close, it will choke out your sound. You want it to just fit under there. Now, you go to the treble side, and all you do is check the bass on the treble side. The treble side is 3/32. Same thing, you don't want them too close or too far away. They have to be in that sweet spot. Up or down, adjust as needed. I'm starting to like the way this guitar is responding. It needs to settle, but I think we can play it a little bit and show by ear that it's coming back into pitch, because you can't really hear that on the camera mic. So let's see where we're at. I like it. All right, I say it over and over and over again. Not a guitar player, but I'm going to try to strum a few chords for you. All right? So the last little exercise is I'm not going to kill you with that, but I hear some buzzing. I think there's going to be a fret leveling in this guitar's future. We got a high fret right in that area. So I'm not going to kill you with that process. Today's exercise was really going over what tools we use, what tools we use a lot of. Sorry, let me adjust here. Capo. Yeah, you're going to need something to adjust the truss rod, but this particular one is pretty easy. Capo. String height gauge. Where did my other, 12 thousandths feeler gauge. You need some sort of Allen wrench set, metric and standard, depending on what you're working on, because you're going to have to deal with little set screws. Usually the truss rods are, depending on what you're working on, are usually metric 5 or 4 millimeter. This one happens to be 7 millimeter, but it's a hex. A wrench. I hope this was helpful. Like I said, DH Goody asked, and I tried to provide the best that I could. This guitar is ready to roll. It's staying in tune. It's going to be stable. I like to let them set overnight, and then I'll check it again tomorrow. It's not going to go back to the client for several days because I happen to have 2 of his instruments in the shop. So that's it. That's pretty much it. Truss rod adjustment, which is neck relief. Intonation, string height, pickup height. The only thing we didn't check, and I'll show you how I do that, but I did it off camera, is your first fret action. 20 thousandths on a guitar. It should just buzz. Seems like the D is a little tall, but we'll get to it. The D and the G are a little tall, but on this particular instrument, because of the radius of the board, I'm going to leave it. If you start cutting those down, we're not pulling anything out of tune when we're fingering chords up here, so that's going to stay. I mean, they'll tell you it's 23 thousandths up here. I use a 20, which is much smaller. And if you can get it like that, it's going to be stable. Our bridge and saddle assembly is level with the body. This one's good. We're going to call it good. I hope I answered your questions. I hope I was a little more informative with the types of tools that I use and what they do. If you have questions or comments, keep them coming. I'm happy to help. We'll talk soon. Remember, if you dig what I'm doing, like and subscribe.